My goal with each episode of the podcast is to introduce an interesting person and create an entertaining conversation, all while digging into the detail of some aspect of revenue growth. So I thought it would make sense for us to take a quick tour through the episodes in case there's some that you might have missed or might want to revisit. Hi there, and welcome to this special episode of the Industrial Growth Institute podcast. I'm your host, Ed Marsh, and I'm dropping this episode after a 2-week holiday hiatus. I've got 2 different episodes planned to kick off the new year. This week is going to be a quick tour through the 41 episodes in calendar 24. Next week is going to be an episode in which I try to break down 2 massive secular changes, which I believe are reshaping the way that we'll market and sell industrial products and services, but changes which I would argue are not fully appreciated yet. So here's a tease. So that's a tease for next week, but let's dive in now to the recap. And as I start, I just want to quickly recap my vision for the podcast. My experience is that frequently middle market industrial manufacturers take too narrow a view of their revenue growth function. There's often a vestigial mindset that revenue growth is a very linear process with a small marketing function that does some branding and trade shows, journal ads, and maintains a website, feeding the sales function as a next step. There are varying degrees of digital marketing savvy and similarly varying degrees of sales refinement among industrial companies. Often sales teams are larger than marketing teams, and resource allocation tends to match the org chart. So, that was fine when we relied on green Thomas Register books on the big bookcase on the wall, or the yellow pages, or simple websites. But today, with large buying teams and prospects around 70% of the way through their buying journey before they want to talk to a sales rep, it isn't fully appropriate. The reality is that most companies are decent at some and not so great at others, and often completely missing a couple of the important pieces. I mean, after all, this is really complex stuff. So this podcast sets out to speak with a variety of folks with complementary perspectives. Some are high-level theorists. Some are tactical specialists. Their perspectives cover a wide variety of a range of topics, from the role of board governance and revenue growth today, through strategy, a wide range of marketing-related topics, many sales-related topics, as well as customer success and technology, the tech that weaves through these disciplines. At a high level, it echoes my overall revenue effectiveness methodology, and that helps to look at revenue growth as a system, similar to manufacturing operations, that can be optimized and engineered. My goal with each episode of the podcast is to introduce an interesting person and create an entertaining conversation, all while digging into the detail of some aspect of revenue growth. I spent a great deal of time preparing for each episode. I hope that you find value in the discussions. And so I thought it would make sense for us to take a quick tour through the episodes in case there's some that you might have missed or might want to revisit. I'll provide a quick description and then links to each episode below in the video and audio description. I kicked off with a pilot episode in March where I shared more on the intent and philosophy, and then jumped into episode number 1 featuring Chris Fox, discussing the role of video in industrial marketing. Chris comes from a written content background and made a transition to video. He's also a musician. He's a bourbon expert. He's been under deadline as a journalist for a long time. Now he's particularly focused on how well-produced video can help tell a story and capture the essence of how your products impact buyers. We talked about a variety of interests, from bourbon and AI and editing, and even a quick dive into how easily a company can start with just a couple GoPro cameras. In number 2, I spoke with former Army Special Forces Sergeant Major and combat diver, sales BDR business development representative extraordinaire, Sean Hurd. Sean shared stories of his military career, including time in the Ranger Regiment and as a Green Beret, and he tied those to his career transition. After retiring from the military, he went into sales and in a matter of months was the top performing BDR in his company. Bob Apollo joined me for episode 3 to lament the state of accountability and training in sales and to explore his outcome-centric selling model. Bob focuses on complex B2B sales, meaning long sales cycle, high-ticket, large buying team, and leverages many of the important lessons he learned early in his career selling door-to-door. Number 4, dove into aftermarket service as a sales differentiator and a source of continuous and additional revenue streams. Markus Rimmele traveled the world as an electromechanical service technician, Later got an electrical engineering degree and along the way learned firsthand about the inefficiencies of the traditional service model. Now he helps companies implement technology to improve service, which creates additional revenue opportunities, including recurring revenue to smooth out capital equipment cycles. Marketing and channel sales legend Peter Caputa IV, to be official, was the featured guest in episode 5. Peter was the 15th employee at HubSpot, and he led HubSpot's channel partner program. In fact, he had the original vision and had to work repeatedly to get management support for his effort to start the channel program that eventually, through agencies, represented about 60% of HubSpot's revenue. We discussed athletes, the grit that they bring, the Canadian sales, and took a deep dive into Pete's specialty of analytics and data to guide marketing and sales. In episode 6, Carole Mahoney joined me to discuss her then new book at the time, Buyer First Sales. Carole shared her story of going from a waitress whose credit card didn't work to buy groceries for her kids to a successful sales trainer, coach, speaker, and author. We focused on the role of the sales manager as the really critical fulcrum for sales team development and success. Terri Hoffman, the founder and president of Marketing Refresh, jumped in for episode 7, a conversation during which we discussed the carryover between her NCAA athletics career and her work leading a marketing agency. We talked again about accountability and changing SEO and content creation, and the gap between how most industrial manufacturers buy versus how they sell, and the changes they need to make in order to support their buyers. Number 8 brought Jeff Cross to the virtual studio. Jeff is a content creation machine. He started a newsletter when he was running his own commercial cleaning business. That newsletter took him in interesting directions, ending up as a media director for ISSA, the Commercial Cleaning Trade Association. He shares a variety of tips on efficiency and content creation, particularly his journey into video, which powers so much of his and ISSA's content. Mario Trafficante joined me for episode 9. Mario is another NCAA athlete who has had an impressive career in sales. We talked about discipline, grit, and routine. Mario shared an important sales KPI that he tracks with his team, and that's quality conversations. And he offered tips for early qualification questions that can avoid the curse of deals ending in no decision. Strategic communications and board governance expert Trista Morrison was a guest for episode 10. Trista is a trained biologist who kind of stumbled into journalism and built a career around the discipline of strategic communications. She made the point really effectively in our conversation that strategic communication serves as a forcing function to clarify strategy. Through her work on strategy, she spends a lot of time educating and serving on boards of directors, and she offers insights into the board's role in strategy and for revenue growth. For episode 11, I swapped sides of the microphone with industrial sales and marketing podcast innovator Scott MacKenzie. Scott's career has carved an interesting path, from taking a company public to starting podcasting before it was a thing, just based on his intuition that it was the best path for him to differentiate the staffing company that he was running at the time. We lament the state of industrial trade show lead follow-up among industrial sales teams, and we talk about the opportunities for podcasting. Former HubSpot agency partner CEO and now CRO of the rapidly growing Pavilion community, Kathleen Booth, dropped in for episode 12. We focused on the growing role of community in building trust and brand, as well as the power of in-person events, and perhaps the renewed power of in-person events as we come out of the COVID period. In episode 13, I featured John Selig, who joined me to talk about using humor to differentiate your sales and marketing. John specializes in helping B2B companies craft one-liners that serve as pattern interrupts to help sales teams start conversations. The key takeaway, though, was that in order to do his work, he often has to start by helping teams actually understand what they're selling, because in many cases, they may not. For number 14, John Panaccione brought his insights regarding the value of veterans on your business team. John served as an armor officer in the 82nd Airborne Division, yes, parachuting tanks onto the drop zone, and he's worked tirelessly creating and stewarding veterans entrepreneurship programs. He had a successful software exit. His company actually produced or supplied PRM, partner relationship management software, and now he's got a business that helps companies crowdsource funding. Number 15 focused on strategic pricing with Lisa Spadafora Thompson, who has almost personally defined the discipline of strategic pricing. Lisa took me through how pricing actually infuses most aspects of marketing and sales and some of the core elements of a solid strategic pricing plan. One of the biggest takeaways is the necessity to have a discount strategy rather than just a stream of ad hoc reactions to pricing situations. We took a deep dive into welding and leadership and product management and channel sales in episode 16 with Dustin Levy. Dustin's a former college athlete and a chemistry PhD. He shared powerful insights into his journey from a deeply technical product expert through product marketing into sales and the lessons learned about making the message accessible to buyers. He's trained to speak very technically, and he realized that that wasn't necessarily the right way to reach buyers. Brisa Renteria and I chatted about hiring salespeople and fostering accountability in episode 17. Brisa shared an inspiring story of her early entrepreneurial activities in Mexico, her success selling Sandler sales training, and her decision to form her own sales hiring consulting agency. We spoke at length about accountability, sales management, and sales hiring decisions, how tricky and difficult they are. In episode 18, I spoke to the guy who wrote the book on partnerships, Franz Josef Schrepf. Franz Josef started in marketing and just kind of stumbled into partnerships by chance at a time when there was relatively little discussion but growing awareness of the approach for growth in the SaaS world. He started creating content, including articles and live video, with a heavy emphasis on LinkedIn. And when we spoke, he had just published his book, The Book on Partnerships, How Startups Work with Partners to Sell More, Add Features, and Get Acquired. Ben Tago, the CEO of Objective Management Group and recent recipient of Pavilion's 50 CEOs to Watch recognition, offered insights in episode 19 around using data to optimize sales hiring and management. Ben shared his background in data analytics and private equity and more on the tools that OMG offers B2B sales teams looking to improve their team's performance and to make better hiring decisions. ABM expert and Army veteran John Russo led the conversation in episode 20. John brought years of accumulated CMO experience, including an IPO, and shared his thoughts on the reality of ABM or account-based marketing from what was really a hype stage 5 years ago to what he calls an integrated account-based go-to-market motion now. John brings real-world experience. He helps companies actually implement ABM, not just the buzzwords and chatting about it, in order to successfully target key accounts in a really honestly integrated marketing and sales approach. As we kicked off August episodes, longtime sales operations expert CC Kintner joined me for episode 21. I first met CC in the early 90s as she was leading the marketing and sales channel enablement program for a capital equipment manufacturer. Having worked in events in the meantime, today she manages sales operations for a managed services company and shared insights into the key functions of that role, how buying behaviors are changing, the role of sales enablement, and other topics. Dan Ott and I took a dive into generational differences in digital marketing for traditional industrial spaces in episode 22. Another former college athlete, Dan decided to actually go into advanced manufacturing to start his career. Staying within that space, he moved from the back end of the business, where he was on the production floor running machine tools, to the front end in marketing. And today he leads efforts at the NTMA, National Tooling and Machining Association, or the Machine Shop Trade Association, to help companies use digital approaches to grow their industrial business from a marketing and sales perspective, but also a recruiting and retention perspective. Small business advocate and podcasting radio legend Jim Blasingame dropped lots of wisdom in episode 23. Jim is a former Army airborne officer and really a legendary business consultant and a very early podcaster. Jim's Small Business Advocate radio show and podcast was reaching small business owners long before anyone really understood the transformative power of the internet. We dove into his book, The Age of the Customer, which I think he wrote a decade ago and which really foretold many of the evolving buying habits that we see today. Rudy Scarrito, a boutique investment banker, shared important tips regarding preparing a company for transaction and the role of revenue growth during episode 24. A former NCAA team captain, Rudy Rudy operated at the highest levels of the New York investment banking world before founding her own firm to focus on lower middle market sell-side banking. We discussed how companies need to prepare for a transaction well in advance, including developing systems for predictable revenue growth. I hated pretty strongly on CRM in episode 25, but maybe not as strongly as my guest, a professional CRM hater, Adam Honig. Adam has helped countless companies implement CRM and try to resurrect poor CRM implementations. He's had a couple successful exits, including recently selling a CRM company he co-founded called Spiro AI, where he remains as a CEO. We discuss the various barriers to successful CRM implementation and adoption. Number 26 featured the legend behind the Marketing Book podcast, Army vet Douglas Burdett. He and I chatted about all the lessons he's learned, and we got a curated suggested reading list. Doug's years of reading and conversation with various marketing and sales thinkers makes him an amazing resource for insights into how the disciplines have evolved, and who some of the most impactful thinkers are. Alyssa Gelbard joined me for episode 27. Lisa Gelbard joined me for episode 27 to discuss the role of personal branding for executives and her company. Point Road Group's research into the perceived impact of executive presence on LinkedIn was really eye-opening for me. And Elisa's bottom line is simple. Company leaders must work proactively to build their executive presence on LinkedIn. It's not a personal necessity, but it's a business one. For episode 28, channel sales expert Vaughn Mordecai shared perspectives on how industrial companies can learn from technology channel sales teams. Vaughn has a career in market research and recently became the CRO of Mind Matrix, a PRM or partner relationship management software company that has a long history in tech, but is expanding into industrial manufacturing. In late September, ARC Specialties founder and director of marketing Dan Alford and Johnny Taylor, respectively, brought insights to episode 29 discussing the role of social media, LinkedIn, and video in their business growth. There are a lot of people online who expend a lot of hot air talking about what they do. Dan just does it, and he has for years. He's built a global business selling automation and robotics for various industries, including oil and gas and industrial and defense applications. He spent years just answering questions that people had, but found himself slowed down with the efforts of mediocre marketers that he hired until he found Johnny, who's really helped him break out and shine. I mean, Dan, even with Johnny's help, put a podcast studio in their industrial manufacturing facility. I thought that was pretty cool. Episode 30 featured Amy Franco, a sales expert. Amy had a successful career in tech sales before she set up her own sales strategy consulting business. In addition to being a consultant, she's a frequent keynote speaker and an author, and our conversation really focused deeply on what directors, board of directors need to, particularly independent directors, need to understand about marketing and sales. Al Rosenbaum brought his insights into sales messaging and what he calls an undeniable value proposition for episode 31. Al started in sales in 1989 when companies routinely invested in training reps. He's sold a variety of technology and now consults with sales teams, and the core of his insight is really simple. If you talk about your stuff, you lose. Sales success comes from deeply understanding how your products change your buyer's business and what the impact is on them personally and professionally. Podcaster, author, former Wall Street trader, and former Coast Guard officer Jared Dillian was the guest for episode 32, talking about content creation. Jared's an author. He's a DJ. But I'd say he's primarily a financial newsletter writer. I subscribe to a couple of his products and value his sentiment analysis of various market factors, and I've read a couple of his books. He's actually published across 5 different genres. It's flu season here in New England. Apologize for keeping coughing. This episode with Jared was focused on helping folks overcome writer's block and stop making excuses about their content. He comes from a background where nobody would have expected him to be the amazing writer that he is, and he just forced himself to do it, and there was a lot of important insight. Father and son team Matt and Jack Watson were the guests on episode 33. We discussed how they're using social media to recruit skilled tradesmen for their business. This episode pairs well with my conversation with Dan Ott, who helps companies like HFW think about using digital tools for marketing, sales, and recruitment. And this is an interesting multi-generational story with encouraging results, hiring hard-to-find tradesmen for this family-owned company in Buffalo. Number 34 featured Chris Dunn, a longtime trade show and exhibit expert. Chris has probably been to more trade shows than just about anyone except maybe a Freeman decorating veteran, and he's seen lots done well and lots done not so well. We spoke at length about the most common missed opportunities, and probably lighting would be the thing that he cites the most, and how often poor lead follow-up detracts from the potential return of this very large expense. Another NCAA athlete, Patrick Hayes, shared lessons learned as a football team captain and in the Peace Corps during our conversation for episode 35. Following stints in trading and time at Bridgewater Associates, Patrick founded Mukala Partners, a firm that focuses on helping private equity portfolio companies optimize their management teams and culture. We talked about the delayed impact of work from home, family-owned business dynamics, and various assessment tools that he and I each use in our practices. In number 36, we learned some real-world lessons about partnership sales from Samantha Gaden. Samantha started her career selling machines, and along the way she found that forging partnerships helped her to sell more. In some cases, these were traditional distribution arrangements, but in others they were innovative adjacencies that yielded opportunity. It's not theory in this conversation with her. There's a lot of actionable suggestion and real-life examples. Salim Awad, a former Army combat diver and president of Spinner North America, sat down with me at the IMTS show in Chicago to record episode 37. Salim shared his life story for important context, talking about his early career in law, his mom's murder by the FARC in Colombia, his military experience in the U.S. military and his path to citizenship, and his commitment to growing American advanced manufacturing. We took a deep dive into how he uses LinkedIn to reach prospects and customers as the CEO of an industrial machinery company where many of his peers say there's just no place for it wouldn't work. Episode 38 featured insights from Kurt Palmer discussing family business transactions, industrial distribution, and capital equipment sales. Kurt's career started as a chemical engineer and then moved into a family business distributing supplies to the printed circuit board industry. He and his brother navigated a successful transaction, and he then shifted from consumables to capital equipment and from being a channel partner to selling through channel. Kurt offered insights on family business transactions or transitions, as well as transactions and machinery sales. Mickey Vandeloo warned us not to leave money on the table during our conversation for episode 38. Mickey started her career as an engineer, kind of chanced into selling, and then stumbled into grants in her efforts to help her companies find money to subsidize investment in growth possibilities. She's turned that into a business that helps industrial manufacturers develop and execute a grant strategy. And really boil it all down is because as a grandmother, she's particularly bullish on American manufacturing and wants her grandchildren to have the opportunity that she had. I spoke with strategic accounting expert Mike Sibley in episode 40. Mike's an accountant, but he's happy to point out he's not a bean counter. He's much closer to a management consultant if we think of a continuum. Mike leads the manufacturing and distribution practice for James Moore and Company. We spoke about the strategic vision that he believes accountants should bring to their manufacturing clients, the fact that debt isn't always bad, why he had his team take sales training, and the fact that maybe marketing budgets should not be the first thing to be slashed if there's some sort of a downturn. And then David Anderson wrapped up the regular episodes for 2024 in episode number 41 on December 18th. David is the co-founder of Angora Tech, where he is using machine learning to solve a problem he encountered as a young mechanical engineer right out of MIT. There's a lot of rote tasks that fall to engineers, and there's a dearth of value-creating sales and marketing materials. So he plans to imbue his LLM with tacit knowledge from decades of engineering and simplify the rote tasks so that engineers stop wasting time. There's really important insights to consider here for your industrial marketing and sales. Those are the episodes. We'll be back on January 22nd with a standard guest episode, and next week on the what is going to be, I guess, the 15th or 13th, I'll share some thoughts to frame the challenges that I believe manufacturers need to address. As I wrap up, just a couple themes that kept popping up during last year's episodes that may be worth thinking about. First, the prevalence of military veterans and NCAA level athletes that are leading these companies or these functions at their companies and really kind of creating this unique thought leadership. Second, the frequency with which credentialed engineers are leading marketing and sales related functions. And third, the degree of complexity and nuance embedded in each tactic and topic. Do you need to find outside experts for each? No, but you should find places where they share their insights and where they go for information themselves. That will gradually help you appreciate the complexity of something that might otherwise seem just a simple administrative task and potentially unlock additional opportunity for you. Each episode includes information on how to connect with a guest if you'd like to take some additional conversation offline with them. Please let them know that you found them through the Industrial Growth Institute podcast. And as always, thank you for joining. I'm grateful for you investing time in these conversations. Please like and share and comment on any episode that you think adds value, and be sure to subscribe. Here's to a great 2025 for all of us, and look forward to sharing some of my key ideas next week as we head into 25.